All right, so welcome everyone to Think You Know Wine. I am so excited that you guys have all joined us today. My name is Renée Sferrazza. I'm your host this evening, and we are joined by John Szabo, the amazing John Szabo. Hello.
Hello, hello. So great to be together here on a blustery February evening. Then again, where else would we be? But it's great to be at least somewhat in the same room drinking wine together.
Totally. And we're also joined by the amazing David Lawrason.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to have you all back. And those who are here for the first time, I hope you really get a kick out of it.
Fantastic. We also have the awesome Sara D'Amato. Sara, hello.
Hello. Cheers to everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight.
And finally, we have the amazing Michael Godel.
Thank you, Renee. Welcome, everyone. Hope you enjoy the show. Should be an interesting one tonight.
Yes, and all of our critics are from Wine-A-Line, which Wine-A-Line is an amazing wine review site. They review thousands of wines every single month, and our critics are the principal writers behind them. We're so thankful about that. And what I wanted to do was just go over a little bit of housekeeping with everybody. If you are having trouble viewing all of our critics, everything that's going on this evening, just go up to View Options on the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can change those view options to see our critics, either whoever is talking in speaker mode or in gallery view, so you can see all of us at the same time. The other housekeeping item that we are going to do today is that we want you guys to enjoy the wines and to talk about the wines, but we do not want you at all to give away exactly what the wine is and what region it's from as the critics are moving through the wines themselves. Please feel free to talk about any tasting notes that you might have, but please do not give away the grape, the country, the region, the producer. Just makes it a little bit more of a fair game for all of our critics here. I know we're not throwing any pearls onto the dance floor, but we're trying not to give any extra hints here and there as we go throughout the evening. So we're going to have various polls come up throughout the night. We're going to put our first one up right now. And we're going to find out what our critics are drinking before we hop into all of our wines for this evening. John, what are you enjoying tonight?
Well, Renee, so glad you asked. I'm drinking a little bubbly rosé that I drove through a blizzard this morning to pick up at my local supplier of sparkling wine, Hinterland, in Prince Edward County. My neighbors here. And this, I got to tell you, is a pretty hot deal. It's a back release. Just 90 bottles were recently disgorged of the 2012 and then put on sale at the same price as it was when it was originally released. So 39 bucks, I think it is, for traditional method sparkling wine from a great area. It's great. And can I show off my new t-shirt as well? It's my new swag. Thanks to my co-host, Sara D'Amato. The Wine Thieves podcast now has its very own t-shirts. They're not for sale, but we're sporting them. So if you haven't checked out our podcast, Wine Thieves, it is on Wine-A-Line. You'll see it on the drop-down media tab. And we've had some great interviews all around the world and over 20 episodes now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. David, what are you drinking tonight?
I've got a fantastic winter white in my glass. So a winter white is rich, it's complex, it's got all kinds of style to it. And this is one of my favorites. It's a Semillon, so that's a grape variety from Stratus Vineyards in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And during our Wine-A-Line Guide to Canada's Best Wines tastings last fall, excuse me, this was the top scoring Sauvignon Blanc or Semillon in the group. And it's a gorgeous wine, and it's only $32, actually. It's a great price for it.
That's absolutely amazing. Sara, what are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, so tonight I am drinking a Riesling from Niagara because last week I had a little difficulty placing that Riesling. And this one is from 30 Bench. This is a small lot Riesling. And as a bit of a side note here, David and I were going to be hosting a Cabernet Franc night this time next week, featuring the winemaker from 30 Bench, Emma Gardner, and a couple of other fantastic producers.
Yeah, so everybody stay tuned for that. And I'm sure you can find out a little bit more on the Wine-A-Line website as well. Oh, go right ahead, David. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in quickly on that because Sara and I are hosting it. Really looking forward to it. It's called Canada's Cabernet, which I think is a brilliant title for the webinar. We're going to be joined by 3 winemakers from Andrew Peller, and this company is doing great work with this variety in Niagara. We've got Craig McDonald, who makes the Trius. We've got Emma Gardner, who makes a fantastic 30 Bench Cabernet Franc, and Emily Dickinson, who does the Andrew Peller Cabernet Francs. But all of them, all three of those wineries scored in our top 10 in the Cabernet Franc taste-off last fall.
And
So
amazing.
It's going to join us a week tonight. It's going to be great.
It is going to be absolutely amazing. And you can find out more on the Wine Line website. And there's a link that was just placed in the chat for everybody that is curious or is already joining in to go and find out a little bit more about the Cabernet Franc tasting that is happening on next Saturday night. Same time, same place, your house on Zoom. Enjoy that part. And then Michael, what are you drinking this evening?
As you know, Renee, I've always got two going.
I love that
Just
about
in
you.
case, we got to prep our palates. We don't know what's coming our way. So we got to make sure that we're ready for anything that comes our way. But the white that's in my glass is, and everybody, all my colleagues know this one well because we've all tasted it in the last 2 days, Batchelder. This is the Wismar Wingfield West Chardonnay. Pretty impressive recent bottling from Thomas Batchelder. And I read, no surprise there, I've got a Chianti Classico from Badia a Coltibuono, which is in Gaiole in Chianti Classico 2018. Just one of the great traditional historical estates and wines to boot. So that's what I got going.
Absolutely amazing. Our audience, thank you for joining us this evening again. And I see that most of you guys are drinking one of the wines for this evening. So let's get everything started. I'm going to get my critics to pull out their glasses and the vial for wine number one. Get you guys to pour that into your glasses for us. And then we're going to send you off to the critics lounge so that we can find out what wine number one is going to be for you guys. Thank you so much. Keeping it all above board over here, everybody, trying our best. All right, so our first wine for today is the Zenato Valpolicella Superiore. It's 2017. The varietals are Corvina, Rondinella, and Corvinone, and it's from Italy. We have the region as Veneto. The appellation is DOC Valpolicella Superiore. The vintage is 2017, and it is $18.95. Is the overall price for this wine. So we're going to see how close our critics get to it. Please, we're going to get our critics back in the room as they file back in. And just as a reminder to everyone, you can please submit your questions for our critics in the Q&A and to please not give away the wine in the chat. That would be absolutely amazing. And I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, critics, just as a reminder to all of you, you are on mute, so if you can unmute yourselves whenever you feel ready. Give you another moment to get to the wine, and then we will go in our round robin circle and see what everybody thinks about it. All right, so first up for wine number one. John, can I go over to you first?
Oh, please do.
Yay! What do you think? What's your first thoughts on wine number one?
Wine number one, I have to say, I put my nose in the glass and I was immediately transported somewhere. I'm going to save that exact location for just a moment from now. But very interesting wine, very textural wine, lots of glycerin without a lot of alcohol. I mean, it's not a low alcohol wine, but I don't think it's a really high alcohol hot wine. And then a range of flavors that for me is mostly red fruit, but also dried fruit with a little undercurrent of herb, twig, leaf, underbrush, slightly resinous. I see this wine aging in a big old wooden vat somewhere.
Try not to give too much away with that, I see.
Or I don't have any idea what it is. So
it can be either or at this point. David, what do you think is going on with wine number one?
Well, the first observation, just as it poured into my glass, was the color. not hugely deep colored wine, but it's actually the shade. It's into that mature garnet shade. So immediately I was looking at a more mature wine, and to me the aromas and flavors sort of bore that out. Still lots of lovely red fruit, as John said. All the sort of herbal, twiggy, earthy things. Maybe just a little bit of leather creeping in, which is again maturity. I really like the wine. Actually, it's very pleasant, and I would drink, if I had a case of this, I'd drink it by April 1st. It's not tired, but it's drinking at its best right now.
There you go. You're gonna get through that case fairly quickly. Sarah, what do you think of wine number one? What's your first thoughts on wine number one?
Yeah, so as they both sort of alluded to, I think that this is a wine perhaps from the old world, also older. Given the color of this wine, as well as some of the aromatic characters, it's a very aromatic wine, as well as being textural, a little bit peppery, and lots of red fruit. Oak is beautifully integrated. It's had time to mellow here. And I think that there's a distinct meatiness to this wine, which is leading me to a certain area.
Amazing. And we are going to put up our poll for our votes. So who you think is going to be winning round number one. We're going to put that poll up now, but I also encourage you guys to listen to Michael and what Michael's thoughts are on wine number one. Michael, what are your thoughts on wine number one?
So I love where my colleagues have led me on this. I really appreciate the detours, but I agree with John that I'm transported immediately somewhere, and I'm not just transported immediately somewhere, I'm transported immediately somewhere I've been. And I can picture myself standing in a vineyard and in a cellar in this particular place. So agreed with the herbalness to it, and dried fruit, and dusty, savory. The meaty part that Sarah alluded to me is like a cured salumi kind of meatiness, which again is a very old world kind of scent. I agree with John in the glycerin without too much alcohol. It's a really balanced wine, but that herbal, that brushiness, that mountain tea aspect of it, to me really takes me somewhere specific, and the maturity of it. But last, the idea that it's not just French wood that has helped this wine along.
I absolutely love that. And I just wanted to go over quickly. We are going to have our poll coming up now. So everybody please vote on who you think is going to win round one. But our critics have a bunch, can score 10 points per round, and they are able to get 3 points for varietal, 2 points for the country, 1 for the region, 1 for appellation, 2 points for vintage, plus or minus a year. They'll only get 1 point. And they can also score 1 point for price within a 30% range, 15% below, 15% above. So 10 points overall is what our critics are able to score. We're going to be keeping up the poll for a little bit longer. Please place your vote on who you think is going to take it this round. And I am going to head back over to John in just a moment. We're just going to keep the poll up just slightly longer, and then we will be taking it down in about 30 seconds. So everybody, if you can please get your vote in. All right, John, what is wine number one to you?
Laying it on the line. All right, so all the information is triangulating me to Italy, Northern Italy in particular. That mix of red fruit plus the herbal plus the old large wood plus the glycerin takes me to the eastern part of Northern Italy, specifically the Veneto, more specifically Valpolicella, more specifically Valpolicella Ripasso. That slight dried fruit character. I agree, there's color in the wine. Garnet looks like an old wine, but I think it's a prematurely old wine, which is to say when you dry grapes, you're gonna get more garnet pigmentation, plus the varieties Corvina, Corvinone, Rondinella, Molinara, basic ones of Valpolicella also go in that direction. So that is my final answer. 2017, 18, Valpolicella Ripasso. And for this sort of quality, good, not mind-blowing, 1995. Yes, 1995. Good, pleasant wine.
Amazing. Thank you, John. David, what is wine number one to you?
Well, really good analysis there, John. I'm going to stick with my original thought here, and I am going to say that this is a Merlot-led blend, and it is still old world. It is Bordeaux. It's right bank Bordeaux, but not high quality like Saint-Emilion or Pomerol or anything like that. Maybe one of the Bordeaux satellite appellations. That kind of thing. It's a nice ripe vintage, and I like John's analysis of the fruit here. That this is the only thing that made me wonder, but it is a nice, it's a ripe wine, and so I think it's probably the 2015 vintage. I did say earlier I thought it was fairly mature, so 2015. Good, very good quality, price-wise, probably in the mid-20s. So I'm going to say $24.95.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. Sarah, back over to you. What is wine number one to you?
Well, I understand what David's saying about Bordeaux because of that, just kind of a Cabernet Franc element to this and the herbal notes. But I'm actually going to go to Spain and Tempranillo, Rioja. I think it's probably a Reserva level. And this might be actually a little bit young, but I'm going to actually go for 2015. From Rioja, and in terms of the price, I'm going to say $29.95.
Thank you. And we have Michael. Michael, what is wine number one? I see you're still thinking there, but what is wine number one to you?
So I am going to go with my original thought. John almost swayed me into Valpolicella. I have to tell you, because something glycerin about it. Although I was going to go Valpolicella without the ripasso, but I'm going to go back to my original thought, which is also Spain, like Sarah. There's something about this that takes me to a very specific place. So I'm going to Spain. I'm going to the region of Aragon, specifically Cariñena. And I think it's a Garnacha-based blend. I don't think it's 100% Garnacha, but that's where I think it's from. And also the age on it also takes me away from Veneto and sends me to Spain. So Spain, Aragon, Cariñena, Garnacha blend, 2015. And I think it's really inexpensive. I'm going to say, I don't know, $16.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's where it's from.
And Michael, I do have to say, you are our fan favorite this round. So let's find out. Everybody ready to find out what wine number one is? All right, so take off the little sash bag here that we have. Wine number one is the Zenato Superiore. The grapes are Rondinella and Corvinone. The country is Italy. The region is Veneto. The appellation is DOC Valpolicella Superiore. The vintage is 2017 and the price is $18.95. Congratulations.
I'll take that. I'm happy with that.
Well done, John.
Yes, John.
You did absolutely great. I'm going to get our scoring wizards to come up and show our scores for this round, and we'll dive into a couple of questions for you guys. All right, so John, you scored 10 points. You got a perfect round. Congratulations. Absolutely congratulations to you. You did a great job. And Michael, you have scored a point in this round. You are officially in second place. And I'm very sorry, Sarah and David, but there's been no points accumulated for both of you at this point in time. But it's anyone's game. It's just the first wine. Things are going to happen. But while we enjoy this wine together, I have a couple of questions that have come in. One specifically around, John, you used the word glycerin to comment on this wine. Can you elaborate on that for all of our wine-loving friends in the audience and like how it's being used as a term, as a sommelier, like what it's describing?
Sure, quite simply put, it's a textural term that has to do with the mouthfeel of the wine and the thickness of the wine. You might call it viscosity as well. And things that contribute to viscosity are alcohol. And part of alcohol is glycerol or glycerin, some people call it, same thing, and residual sugar. Here, this is a dry wine, so there's no sugar that amplifies the texture. But here, the glycerol seem to be high, so you can get that in tandem with alcohol, but not necessarily with really high alcohol. And I'm not 1,000% sure on the Zenato there, but I would think that there's some partial drying, maybe not fully ripasso, but it's quite commonplace these days in the Veneto, even for non-ripasso or non-Amarone style wines to, maybe a week or two, maybe not the full 3 or 4 months that you'd have for Amarone, plus the ripasso category. So yeah, textural. If it's a little thicker and more viscous in the mouth, then glycerin is a good candidate for the reason behind that.
And that also answers the question that came in about what does textural mean? It literally means that physical texture that you are feeling when you are tasting a wine, that glycerol texture that John had just recently described, as well as I know that Sarah and actually I think Sarah, Michael, and David all used a textural aspect of describing this wine while we were talking about it. All right, and we also have another question that's coming. We have just a couple questions this round, so I think we're gonna, and one very good compliment. Sarah, your hair looks amazing. That's the compliment. So that I feel like we have to say it because it does. There we go. So we had a question come in about a comment that David made as well, which is, David, you mentioned how you would like to drink this wine now. So I think they're asking, they would like to drink this wine now, best to drink from 2002 and onward. Would I be missing out if I were to buy and drink this wine now, as opposed to only drinking it in 2022? So apparently they had read a review that had said that they can drink it up to 2022, but I guess your recommendation is to read it now. Do you think like this is the best window for it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a window to this. There's sort of a time to start drinking it and a time after which you probably won't enjoy it as much. So this is a sort of a lighter bodied wine. The window will be shorter. It's a 2017. This style is not meant to age a long time. It's meant to be enjoyed young. So, if I was reviewing this wine now, I'd already say it's ready to go and should last, or at least give you some pleasure for another 2 years. But it's not going to improve a lot from here on. I mean, it's showing everything it's got right now. And so that's why, as I said, if I had a case of it, I'd be just going at it. But you don't need to wait for this wine for it to improve.
All right. Thank you, David. And we have two last questions. The first one is, and I'd like anybody to comment and feel like if they could take this, what is the main difference between Paso and Amarone? Just a quick, easy definition would be great. Who feels like taking that one on? Michael, you haven't talked yet.
Sure. Well, the main difference is that both of them, in the end, are made from drying grapes and then rehydrating grapes. But Amarone, the grapes are originally dried for the purposes of making Amarone, and then those dried grape skins, after they've been pressed off, are then used for passing over, which is the appassamento method. Right.
Amazing. Thank you. And then we have one last question. This is the last one. And that is, can you comment on what each of these grapes bring to the blend? A little bit more of a difficult question. Then we're going to move on to wine number 2.
I'll jump in. Corvina or Corvinone, very similar grape. One just has slightly larger berries, is the backbone of most of the reds of Valpolicella. Very important grape in the Veneto, but it's a thin-skinned grape. The color, as we've noted here, is on the paler side, more similar to Pinot Noir or Nebbiolo or Sangiovese. Actually very Italian in color, never deep and inky and purple. And then the fruit profile is predominantly red, with a little bit of, there are pyrazines in this variety. Pyrazines is that herbal character that you get in Cabernet Franc and Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. So same family of aroma. So you've got tart red fruit and a little bit of herbal component. And then Molinara is the third string grape there. I love Molinara, but it's a pretty lean, light, low. It's tough to ripen, so it's usually low alcohol, high acid. And Rondinella kind of fits in the middle there, sort of softens out the edges of both of its stable mates there in the blend. So the basics are there.
Thank you, John, for that very concise answer. That was a lot to describe very quickly. So thank you so much. All right, so we are going to move on to wine number 2. Congratulations again, John, for winning wine round number 1. But critics, I'm going to get you to pull out the second vial that we've sent you and start pouring that in your glasses. We are going to get ready for round 2. There we go.
Hey, Renee, what's the VOM on the vials? This is a little bit new for us.
That's different. I was actually going to ask you.
I think you know what it means. We've been joking around the office. I come in there a little grumpy sometimes when we're tasting. And so when do we get our next round of these vials of misery?
Oh,
so often we get them wrong, that I wanted to call them vials of deceit, vials of misery. You get the point. But
vials of masochism.
Do you feel the same way now after winning round number 1?
Well, I'm just going to shut up for a moment because there's now round number 2, and who knows what might happen there.
We will see how it goes. All right, critics, pour the second wines in your glass. We're going to send you off to the critics lounge. All right, so wine number 2 in our second round here is the Luis M. Martini Sonoma County Cabernet Sauvignon. It's the 2018 vintage. The varietal is Cabernet Sauvignon. The country is the United States of America. The region is California. Our appellation is the Sonoma County. Vintage 2018, and the price is $24.95. So we're just going to stop that screen share and bring our critics back into the room. And again, reminder to everybody that just please share your tasting notes, but don't give away the wine. We can't do that. We can't give them an unfair advantage because somebody else is going to win this round for sure. All right, critics, you have all come back on mute. If when you are ready, just to unmute yourselves. And we have a fun wine for wine number 2. All right, give you guys just a moment to check out this wine, check it out a little bit more. All right. And we had a lovely comment that came in from our audience that around, while you guys are tasting out this wine, before we really dive into it, that the vials of misery, you guys have been making everybody feel really great about their own progress at home. So hopefully that gives a little bit of light to our wonderful critics. All right, so I am going to hop over to Sarah first, because Sarah, you look the most prepared right now. And you know that I'm always going to go over to the person smiling the most or looks most prepared. So sorry, but not sorry. What do you think wine number 2 is?
Well,
sorry. What are your first thoughts on wine number 2? What are your first thoughts on wine number 2?
I should say thank you to Sarah for choosing this one, because I really I always have much better facility blind tasting white wines. They're a little bit more transparent, and red wines have oak treatment and a little bit more age oftentimes, so they tend to mask their original varietal character. But this one is a great variety that I feel pretty confident about. Has a lot of primary fruit character. It's young, it's purplish, it's got a nice peppery eucalyptus nose, and yeah, it's a delight.
Amazing. I'm going to hop over to Michael next. What are your first thoughts on wine number 2, Michael?
My first thoughts are beautifully perfumed, juicy, just bloody delicious. I mean, there's a lot of lush, luxe, volupté, like almost hedonistic character to this, but it's just restrained enough and just herbal enough that it tells me it's not quite as expensive and haughty as we might think. I think it's a really well-priced wine, ton of wine for the money, juicy, as I said, just lush, and it's in that kind of blackberry cassis, really beautiful fruit kind of vein. So I think we're all probably going to go in a New World direction on this. I'd be shocked if anybody did not.
Amazing. All right, David, what are your first thoughts on wine number 2?
Well, I really like it. And I started the night talking about a winter white. This is a great winter red. It's got lots of body. It's rich. It's sort of open-knit and fleshy and inviting. All kinds of black fruit in it, herbal characters, eucalyptus, that kind of thing. And the oak is here. Nicely handled. I mean, there's so much fruit in this wine that even though the oak is also fairly noticeable, those elements are in harmony with each other. Yeah, it's a gorgeous wine. It's rich, it's drinkable, and we'll get to it.
Amazing. And John, what are your first thoughts on wine number 2?
There's an element here that troubles me about this wine, and I'm trying to tease it apart. But for me, it's all of this really juicy, upfront, ripe fruit. It's just bursting with grapiness. It seems very young, but at the same time, for me, there's a lot of wood character here that's sitting on top of the fruit and coating it all around. I don't find it all that well integrated, and I don't find any of the kind of evolutionary oxidative character that you would get out of this wine aged in a barrel. So either it's stainless steel with some kind of wood alternative, or it was a very short period of time in wood, so it didn't have time to evolve past the grapiness, but still acquired the wood flavor, if I explain myself clearly enough. And the length and depth of complexity are okay. I don't think this is a very expensive wine, and the style is leading me certainly to the New World, and then after that, it's where to put it in place. This is not a wine of really distinctive terroir. This is not single vineyard, top of the hill sort of stuff. This is good commercial wine, I would say.
All right, guys, we're going to put up our poll right now. We've heard all what our critics have to say. We are going to dive into what their actual thought, like what they actually think the wine number 2 is. Just as a reminder to everybody, our critics can score 10 points per round. They're going to be able to score 3 points for the varietal, 2 points for the country, 1 for the region, 1 for the appellation, 2 for vintage plus or minus a year, and 1 for price within a 30% range, 15% above, and 15% below. We are going to keep our poll up for the next 15 seconds. Just pick the person that you feel like is going in the right direction this round and place your bets. And we're going to be taking it down in just a quick moment. And I am going to be heading back over to Sarah. Sarah, what is wine number 2?
Okay, so I'm going to go with the variety Shiraz from Australia, from Langhorne Creek, from 2018 with a price of $19.95.
Amazing. All right, over to Michael. Michael, what is wine number 2 to you?
I think wine number 2 is US California. I think it's Cabernet Sauvignon. It's probably blended, but mostly Cab Sauv. I'm not going to be any more specific in California than that because it just could be Sonoma, but it could be North Coast or somewhere else.
Well, do you want to like give me an appellation, because you do score points for appellations?
I guess I can't lose points for it, right? So I'll say North Coast. Okay.
Okay.
And I think it's probably 2017, and I'm going to say it's $25.
Thank you, Michael. David, what is wine number 2 to you?
Okay, well, right off the bat, I'm going with Cabernet Sauvignon as the grape variety, but there's a blend. I mean, normally you would put Merlot in there. I think there might be something else that's snuck in there at less than 25% too, like perhaps Syrah. So Cabernet Sauvignon probably on the label. I'm going to Chile, and I'm going to one of the warmer areas, sort of these big reds in the Colchagua Valley of Chile. 2018 vintage, and $24.95.
Thank you, David. And John, what is wine number 2 to you?
Well, I'm on the Cabernet train. I think this is a Cabernet Sauvignon based wine, probably bits and pieces of some other complementary grapes there, but predominantly Cabernet. And here's the flummoxing thing, you know, at this level, which I already described as good, but still commercial. Where is it from? You know, it could be California, it could be Chile, it could be Australia, could be a number of different places, but we got to hang our hats somewhere. And I'm going to go with my original thought. I think this is California, not quite herbal enough to be Chile, not quite eucalyptus enough to be Australia. And I'm also in the $24.95. I had it written down here. I'm not just stealing David's price. That was what I had, 2018. I do love the fact that this wine is genuinely dry, though. There are a lot of inexpensive California cabs that have a little bit of sweetness. This is dry. This is good, juicy, drinkable wine. Did I miss any points there? Appellation. Wow. I mean, I think it's probably generic California, but if it were anywhere else, it would be North Coast, maybe a North Coast.
I made Michael give one, so you had to give one too. Only fair.
North Coast?
There you go. Perfect.
Mendocino
Awesome.
Sonoma blend. How's that?
Which one do you want to do? North Coast or Sonoma blend? Your choice. You said
well,
both.
They're both in the North Coast, Renee. So I
know.
covered my
I am
bets.
aware.
So like Mendocino and Sonoma blended together, North Coast appellation.
You want to go with that? Okay, cool. Perfect. Awesome. It's your choice, John. I know they're both part of the North
I'm going to go
Coast.
down with a bit of flourish.
Yeah. All right, let's find out. You guys ready to find out what wine number 2 is? We ready? Ready? Drum roll, please. All right, wine number 2 is the Luis M. Martini Sonoma County Cabernet Sauvignon. It is the varietal is Cabernet Sauvignon. The country is the United States of America. The region is California. The appellation is Sonoma County. The vintage is 2018 and the price is $24.95. You guys did a great job this round. So congratulations. And I'm going to get our scoring wizards to bring up the scores for this round. You guys can do that for me, please. All right. So for this round, we've gotten some great points on the board. Okay. We still have John in the lead. He scored 9 points this round. I think you get a choice on your appellation. I'm not trying to lead anyone in any direction whatsoever, but choices are choices. So we have to make them as we go. And then we also have Michael, who is now in a very, very, very tight second with 9 points. We also have David coming up with 6 points and Sarah with 2 points. We still have another wine to go, everybody. It's going to get them to pull our scores down. Perfect. And we did have some questions come in about this wine and about this wine overall, but I actually have a question now that we're going with wine number 2. This genuinely is, it's a very easy wine to get. It's a very easy wine to have in your cellar. Wanted to ask Sarah, why did you go, what pushed you towards Shiraz with this wine?
I think maybe what it was that misled me was the oak treatment, and it had a lot of clove that, you know, on the verge of pepper and licorice, and also the color too. Now Cabernet Sauvignon can have color like this. Certainly they're both deeply pigmented varieties, and when they're young you have this vibrant purple color to it, but it was the aromatic component, and I think the oak was playing a little trickster here on this wine, but also the tannin was a little bit softer than Cabernet Sauvignon for me. That's why.
I could see where you were going with that. And, you know, everybody that's listening, please remember, blind tasting is hard. Like,
thank you, Renee.
blind tasting is hard. Sometimes you think that something is going in one direction when it's not, and it takes such a gut instinct. And even though like gut instinct is all based on day to day, could go one way one day and one day the other way. So it's a very, very difficult thing to do. I did want to ask, especially Michael and John, why North Coast over Sonoma? That's a question that's come in from our amazing audience. Why North Coast over Sonoma? I know I made both of you pick an appellation, but I wanted to see like what your thought, they want to know what your thought process was instead of going more pinpointed and doing more the larger appellation. Michael, do you want to go first?
Sure. So number one is, and John alluded to this when he used the word commercial, but there's a bit of a little bit of ubiquity to this wine. We knew it was Cabernet Sauvignon. We knew it was California. The parameters from which we draw upon to decide that seem pretty obvious to us. And $25 is kind of that midpoint. Anything that's 25 or under is generally not going to be, it's for sure not Napa, and almost for sure not going to be Sonoma either. Anything above 25 more likely will be from a Sonoma appellation. It's very hard, and it's really simply about the price of tonnage of fruit in these places. Napa Valley cannot do wine that cheap. It's just not possible. The land is too expensive. The grapes cost too much money. And so they determine the price of the wine. So I think we both knew that 25 was kind of the number here. And so you heard me go, I could go here, I could go there, I could go Sonoma, I could go North Coast. Ultimately, I chose North Coast because I felt like this was a large production wine, a really well made wine, very high quality, professionalism. It doesn't get much better than this at the price, but that's why I went North Coast ultimately, because of those thoughts.
Amazing. And John, I'm sure you're drinking.
Yeah, it's a question of reverse engineering. You notice we leave the price till the end. You have to pick where you are in the world and then fit the price to that location, because the price of wine, as we all know, is not tied only to the quality of the liquid in the glass, but many other factors come into play, and particularly the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of grapes. These things are more important than sheer quality, which we have trouble kind of defining anyhow. And this for me was, you know, as Michael perfectly described it, a wine right on the edge there. To get this quality under a Sonoma appellation, you know, I would have thought more North Coast, but hey, Sonoma's in the North Coast, so we weren't too far off. I'm okay with that.
No, you guys did absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. All right. So I'd say this is a wine that we should be drinking now. This is a great one to just have at this current moment in time. It's absolutely a delicious wine. And what our audience also wants to know is, how would you identify Napa by comparison? So this, I'm assuming it's because how I would take this as a sommelier is because this wine, it very much tastes like it's not pinpointed. It tastes very broad overall. And I'd love, David, what are your thoughts into why our critics would say something a larger region? I know you went to Chile, but like, what makes you feel like it would be a larger region rather than like something a little bit more pinpointed?
Well, again, the very same things that Michael and John talked about. I have a pretty set a sort of picture of Napa Cabernet in my mind. And I think it's what has made it hugely popular. It's a very ripe, rounded, plush style. And it's at its best, it's phenomenal. But Napa Cabernet very seldom to me has any of sort of Cabernet's green herbal side to it, right? Sort of the eucalyptus, the mint, all those herbal elements. I don't very often find in Napa Cabernet. I certainly find it more in Sonoma Cabernet. So if I had been convinced this was a California Cabernet, not Chile, I would have gone to Sonoma for that reason, because it's a slightly cooler area. So Napa is plush, rich, round. At its best, it's phenomenal, and it's also very expensive. And some of the less expensive Napa Cabernets are completely overpriced, given the very soft, jammy wine that's in the bottle. So this is a nice, well-defined Cabernet, and really well done on getting it as a Sonoma.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. All right, we're going to move on to our third wine of the night. I know our audience, we have some questions pouring in. We will get to some of the later questions later. I'm specifically saving them. We'll see how it goes. But critics, if you guys can open your vial number 3 that we have sent you. Thank you very much. I feel, John, you might be eating your words on that VMO. But if you can pour it into your glasses, and we're going to send you out to the Critics Lounge. Our last wine for today is the Tenuta Sette Ponti, the Crognolo 2017. The varietals in this wine are Sangiovese and Merlot. The country is Italy. The region is Tuscany. The vintage is 2017, and the price is $34.95. Just going to stop sharing my screen there. We're going to get our critics back into the room. I know that you guys have asked some questions throughout the evening. I have been saving a couple of them to the end, so please don't worry about that. And we're going to talk about those a little bit later. We're just going to get our critics to just get into the wine a little bit. I have the wine in my glass as well. And I'm going to go straight over to Michael because he was looking at me dead in the face. And that is exactly usually what happens. Sorry, Michael.
I wasn't looking at you, just so you know.
I know, but it looked like it. So, and you're not in the room with me, so it happened.
Okay.
What are your first thoughts on wine number 1? And if you need another moment, I'm happy to give it to you.
No, I'm right into this wine. I think this one might just be up my alley, which means, of course, I better stick to my original impression, because otherwise I will fall flat on my face. But I love the dusty, savory quality, but really, really good upfront fruit. I think this is a wine that has already served its time, which means that the wood that would have originally made it very tough and added to its tannic presence has kind of softened and moved away a little bit. So we got a few years of age on this, but not into the oxidative or into the secondary notes at all. It's still showing its primary fruit. Very different than wine number 2, a little similar to wine number 1 in certain respects. But I think you know where I'm going with that.
All righty. We're going to move over to John next. John, what are your first thoughts on wine number 3?
I was a bit lost on the nose. And then, to be fair, my wines are all a little chilled because I didn't look at the color of them. I just stuck them in my fridge, I think, like everybody else did. So they're just warming up.
Just so our audience knows, our critics get these wines wrapped in a bag. So it can easily go into a fridge. But continue,
double
John.
blind. Anyhow, it's coming alive in the glass here, but as soon as I put it on the palate, I felt at home. I felt a little bit more comfortable. I felt on familiar ground, quite literally. And the color is there. It's shifting into that garnet spectrum. So it's probably a thinner skin variety with a little bit of age. And then there's this nice, dusty, savory herbal mix on the palate with that juicy fruit that's just starting to dry out. This is a wine that has, I would guess, 5-6 years under its belt at this point. And here's a wine of great depth and power. You know, we're talking tasting blind. I have no idea what the price of this wine is, but I would pay a decent amount for this because it has genuine depth and complexity and length, stuff that you can't manufacture, that comes from just careful farming and good winemaking.
We'll let you ponder on that and the price as well a little bit longer while I move over to Sara. Sara, what are your first thoughts on wine number 3?
Well, it's a highly tannic wine. It's got some firm, dusty tannins. It has a perfumed oak about it, but that has really kind of subsided a bit over time. So I think it has a few years. It's not incredibly old. I mean, it still has a bright ruby color to it. It's juicy, so it's got both acid and tannin. It's a nicely structured wine, as John mentioned. It's got some pretty good length to it as well. So I think it's a very thoughtfully produced wine and well-made wine.
Fantastic. And David, what are your thoughts, your first thoughts on what wine number 3 is?
Yeah, again, very high quality wine. I love the structure of this. I didn't get a lot off the nose. I like the nose right away, but not highly defined, but very complex. You just had to work a little bit harder to get at things. But I really like the way it sits on the palate. It's firm. It's not austere. The tannins are fairly high, which is, but to me, they're not too lean. It's suggesting this wine will actually age gracefully for quite a long time. Again, if I had this in my cellar, I would probably sit on it for 2 or 3 years before I went at it, and then go for at least 10 years on it. It's just a wine of real poise and some sophistication. And therefore, the price is probably a bit higher, but again, that depends where it's from.
Amazing. Thank you, critics. All right, everybody, we do have our poll up right now, so you can vote on which critic you think is getting closer to the actual answer of wine number 3. So place your votes. I do want to say before we really get into everything that we do have 400 people that are joining us tonight, which is a major, major milestone for us here on Think You Know Wine. And we are so happy that all of you guys have chosen to join us. We really appreciate that. And we're going to be heading back into what our actual assessments are of our critics. As a reminder, they can score 10 points in total, 3 for varietal, 2 for country, 1 for region, 1 for appellation, 2 for vintage, plus or minus a year, and 1 for price, 30% range, 15% above and 15% below. We are going to be taking our poll down now. So we'll take that poll down and I'm going to head over to Sara. Sara, what is wine number 3? Sorry, no, Michael, what is wine number 3? Sorry, Michael first. Oops.
Okay, so believe it or not, I'm not going to stick to my original impression.
Okay.
Believe it or not, because just as and this wine is changing, it's evolving in the glass, which is a very important part of it, which shows its age. And, there is so much great structure to this. So I'm actually going to go to France. I think this is a right bank Bordeaux. I think it's specifically from Saint-Emilion. I think it's really good vintage. 2016 would be my guess. And I think it's pretty expensive. I think it's $40, $39.95, $40. Yep. Okay, that's my guess. Locking it in.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now I'm going to go over to John. John, what is wine number 3?
2015 Brunello di Montalcino, $49.95.
Okay, that's very, very, very concise. We're also voted.
I hesitate to say that because I know the map Michael's got behind his, and I bet you were going there. Why did you turn away? Or maybe you turned away for the right reason. Yeah, this for me is Sangiovese. This is Brunello. This is Power. This is good wine.
And you've also been voted fan favorite again, fan favorite for this round, just to let you know about that. Sara, over to you. What is wine number 3 to you?
I think there's some Tuscan charm to this wine here, and in particular because it had a lot of red fruit, but it was also very tannic and had a lot of juiciness to it. But I'll say Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, 2016. And I think it's a really good one, and I'm gonna say $35.95.
Amazing. And David, what is wine number 3?
Well, I was going all over the place on variety and region, but there's just something in the structure and sophistication of this wine that landed me in Tuscany. And I still wasn't sure of the variety. I was kind of with Michael for a moment there, thinking about Right Bank Bordeaux. It's got that kind of feel to it as well. I thought, well, maybe this is a Merlot-based blend from Bulgari, from the Tuscan coast. But no, there's just a bit more sophistication and tightness on the palate. So I have ended up as Sangiovese with the variety. Tuscany, I agree with John, it's Brunello. And I'm in the 2017 vintage. I think it's still got a fair bit of evolution to go, and it was a lighter year. And I'm up at 45.95.
Thank you very much, critics. I see we're in two different camps here. Let's find out what wine number 3 is, our last wine of the night. There we go. Wine number 3 is the Tenuta Sette Ponti Crognolo 2017. It's a blend of Sangiovese and Merlot. The country is Italy. The region is Tuscany. The vintage is 2017. And the price is $34.95. You guys all really got close to this in some respect. So it was a good effort overall. I'm going to jump right over to our scoring wizard right away to share the screen, since we don't have a definitive winner in this one particularly. All right. So overall, we have John, actually we have David that scored the most points this round. David, you picked up 9 points in this final round. Kudos to you. I think you really did nail the aspect of it being from Tuscany overall. John, and also Sarah as well, going a little bit more wider in range. John, you have you're at 7 points this round, and Michael, you have 2. So John, you are our winner overall for this episode at 26 points. David has come in second with 15 points, and Sarah and Michael are tied for third at 11 points. So we can take down this screen. Thank you very much, Scoring Wizards. I think we're going to start off with a very fitting question that has come in from our audience, which was, what was Michael going to say first? And why did he change his mind?
Michael was going to say a Sangiovese-based blend from Tuscany.
Michael should have said that.
Michael should have said that.
Michael should stop talking to himself and just go with his gut feeling. I really like, and that reason I went to Right Bank Bordeaux was the Merlot. So I just, and David said it too. I knew there was Merlot in here. There's a verdancy, a greenness that is so Merlot that I knew was in here. So I knew this wasn't Chianti Classico because the max there could be is 20%. I knew it wasn't Brunello because there can't be any Merlot in it. But I let that Merlot just take over my heart and my brain and every part of me, and that's what happens.
So surprised that you didn't go to IGT. It
was Right Bank Merlot or IGT. It was one or the other, and that's where I went.
All righty. Okay. So thank you for letting us know though, Michael. We really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we did have a couple of questions come in for this wine in particular. And then I have a couple of questions overall that just have come in that I think are really relevant to our overall conversations this evening. So, this wine is clearly the highest price wine that we've done for the night. It is $34.95. What told you on the palate that this was a higher priced wine? So anybody can take this answer for this.
Well, I'll jump in on that. I used the word sophistication earlier in my description. So that's an overall, it's a big word, but it's describing the structure and the balance of the elements. You know, the way the acids, alcohol, tannins line up with the fruit and all the other flavors. And this is actually impeccable in that regard, right? So, I mean, elegant describes it, but it'll even be more elegant in about 5 years with like really, really smooth. The other thing I'm looking for is length of finish. And this had a nice long finish. Went on for a minute or two. So that's the other thing that told me the quality was fairly high.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. We also had a lot of explanations. I think it actually was Sarah that had said dusty tannins within this wine. Can you explain the concept of the terminology of using dusty as a sommelier explanation term for this wine. Like, what does dusty mean? What are we trying to express with that?
Well, I think tannins aren't just this one off textural impression that you get, which is mouth drying or sandpaper. I think that there's quite a wide range of descriptors you can give to tannin. For example, velvety when they're riper. And dusty has a bit of an old world connotation about it. So not these rounder, smoother tannins that are very mouth-filling, but that they're a little bit more angular, not quite as angular as you get in a really cool climate, but they give you this kind of speckling feeling throughout your mouth. So dusting, if you would think of sawdust in your mouth, that kind of a texture, it is a little bit of it. That's what I'm talking about.
Wine is so interesting because there's all these things where it's like, imagine if you ate rocks, imagine if you ate sawdust, that's what it would taste like, which is always so hilarious. That, and Michael, I see that you have your hand up. Do you want to share a point about this? Can you please share it?
No, I wanted to answer someone's question. I noticed as the chat's rolling through that at least 4 different people have said, what is IGT?
Yes, thank you. That was actually going to be my next question, and I was going to swing back over to you. What is IGT, Michael? Please share with us.
So the 3 letters stand for, they're Italian. It's an Italian acronym for Indicazione Geografica Tipica, and this goes back to the 1970s when rogue or rebel winemakers did not want to follow the rules of the appellation where they were making wine. So Chianti Classico was a prime example of that. And so wines were born as Vina da Tavola and then became IGT wines. So they were outside of their appellation, even though the fruit was grown within the appellation. So an example was in Chianti Classico, you could not make a wine that was 100% Sangiovese in 1979. So those who wanted to make one, like Tignanello at the time, like Flaccianello, these are examples, Ceparello, you labeled it IGT. Originally, you could charge whatever you wanted for it because there were no rules against it. But in 1992, the Italian government instituted Goria's law, which started to tax IGT wines at the same level as DOCG appellative wines. So it changed things. But a lot of those producers have stuck to the IGT because there's no reason to come back necessarily, because they're still commanding high prices for their wines that they created. So that's what an IGT can be, a $15 wine, and it can be a $300 wine.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I think we should also mention that IGT is also the category that Super Tuscans fall in, which is a great explanation of why these wines are so expensive. And there's also that cultural aspect to it that comes in. Like everything in wine, there always is a cultural aspect that's part of it. And somebody said something at one time, it makes it a lot more valuable, or it's geared towards a place or whatever, and really starts to bring forward the conversation of the wine. All right, so we have another question that's come in. Many of you guys described this wine as a mature wine. John, you described this wine as being a little bit more aged and having a little bit more maturity on it. What tells you that in the glass? Like what leads you in that direction of age?
A few clues that you can look for. One, starting with the color. Red wines start out either purple or red, and they eventually shift to brown. That's the inevitable conclusion for any wine. It's going to turn into a brown and more pale wine. So you look along the evolution, and then you match it with the variety. So young Cabernet or young Malbec, purple, deeply colored. Young Sangiovese, somewhere a little bit further down that spectrum, because they already starts out red, or Pinot Noir starts out red and eventually moves into garnet. So the color here looked like a slightly older wine, or one of these thinner skin varieties like Sangiovese or Pinot Noir or Nebbiolo. And then the next, of course, is just the condition of the fruit, as we like to call it. So you have red, black, blue, yellow, orange fruit, whatever it is. But then what does that fruit look like? Is it fresh? Is it dried? Is it baked? Is it jammy? Is it overripe? Is it underripe? So you can apply the condition to the type of fruit. And this for me was already dried, red, but dried. So that would also indicate that it had at least a few years. I thought it was a little bit older, but you know, this is not a perfect science, right? You know, it's not fresh out of the vat, and you know, it's not 15 years old. You know, it's somewhere along that evolutionary curve. And after that, it's just matching what you notice in the glass with what you think the variety in the region is. And then you can kind of hone in on. Like I wouldn't have been a 2017 Brunello because they haven't been released yet. So they're legally not on the market. So if I thought it was younger, I would have gone with, I don't know, another appellation, a Chianti or an IGT or something like that. So there you go. All kinds of theory going on in the back. It's not just what's swimming around in the glass and yellow and orange and blue fruit. There's a whole lot of theory that makes a good blind taster successful.
Thank you so much. And that also answers a question that we had come in, which is blind tastings are so challenging. Has there been many 10-point scores in the past? And you know what, just watch all the YouTube videos, guys. Just go on YouTube, find Wine Align and watch all the videos, and you will see why John has literally written on his bottles or has bottles written BMO on them, because we will see how it goes. This has been a really great episode overall. And I did want to touch on a couple of last questions, and thank you very much to our critics for putting all of your efforts forward this evening. This has been a really amazing evening. So one of the questions that's actually come through, which is to say again, John and Sarah, what does your shirt say? And can you please remind everybody what your shirts say and why it is important that they say that? Can you please say that to everybody? That's literally a question. I'm not saying it. I mean, it's 4 questions here that say
show it off there. Yes. Zenato and Szabo, wine thieves.
Yay.
wine podcast.
Unlike this show, we team up to deliver a podcast, and we've got shows that come up every week. Feel free to listen all major platforms, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google, but most importantly on Wine Align. Every time we have a new episode, it comes up on Wine Align, and you can just click play and hear all about. Right now we're finishing up actually a series on Austria, and coming up Vino Nobile di Montepulciano.
And the best part about podcasts, you don't have to do up your hair. See, I mean, this took me hours to get to this stage, whereas when you record podcasts, you just roll out of bed and you clear your throat and away you go. That's the beauty.
Perfect. Just a little bit of Vicks and you're good to go. Perfect. Absolutely amazing. All right. So we have a couple of last questions coming in. This one is, my palate is tapped out after 3 wines. Critics, how can you taste so many wines? David, Michael.
Okay. Well, it's like it's like training to be, and I don't want to say we're Olympic athletes, but you know, people get good at stuff by doing it again and again and again. Day after day, month after month, year after year, tasting rows of wine. So yesterday morning for Wine Align, between 8:30 and 12:30, I tasted 40 wines, as we all did in the last 48 hours. So there's this repetition, there's this mindset that you get into. You build up your body's ability to do this. It's like a physical training, it's mental training. You pace yourself, you do it in a certain order. You don't taste too much of one wine, you never swallow, you always spit, and your body and your mind become trained to do it. It's as simple as that. You know, it's not mysterious, actually. It's just a matter of training.
It's like going to the gym. I look at people
going to the gym.
Yeah, I look at people that are very fit and I'm like, how did you do that? I don't understand. It's a very similar thing. I don't feel like going and lifting the heavy thing many times to accomplish this item, but I will continue to taste wine as an academic evening after evening to accomplish a specific goal. I think they're very, very similar overall. And we have our very, very, very last question of the evening. This is actually our last question, and I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, which is, what are the skills of a wine critic, and how are the skills of a wine critic and a sommelier different? I would think a critic can assess wine against a benchmark, and a sommelier deals more with appellation, food, wine, personal preference. How much overlap is between a sommelier and a critic? This is a very cerebral question. Glenn, who has asked it, thank you very much. So I think it's a really fitting one to end on, as I'll hear from all of our critics. If you can voice your opinions, would be absolutely amazing.
Sarah, why don't you start?
That's a real deep question.
It is a deep question, but But Sarah's had both in her background. So
Yeah. So I think the difference in what you do, and I think a lot of people still call me a sommelier, even though what I do mainly now is write about wine and teach about wine. But you know, in terms of a sommelier, you're obviously working the floor, so you're working in a restaurant, and your job is a little bit psychologist and business person as well too, because you have to run a wine list. Now you're tasting a lot, but the tasting is a little bit different than tasting as a critic, because as a critic you're tasting and you're writing to a very specific audience, which are consumers, generally speaking. And as a sommelier, also consumers, but you're trying to evaluate a wine that works with a menu, which is a little bit different. So you look for markers like acid, for example, which tends to work a little bit better with a lot of foods. And you tend to look for wines that are food friendly. So that wines that showcase characteristics that are just a little bit incomplete, but work really, really well with food. Whereas a critic, you're looking to give value to your customers who are going out to a store and purchasing wine. So as far as tasting, they both taste a lot. But critics do taste quite a bit more about what's available on the shelf right now.
And John, I think you might have something to say about this as well, because you are also our master sommelier here in the evening. And this is such a really interesting topic, even to me by myself, as someone who works as what I like to call a virtual sommelier. So I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, listen, for me, there isn't really such a big difference. You know, as a critic, we're always looking for great values. We're trying to be as objective as possible and put the wine into the context. As a sommelier, you would be looking for the same thing. I mean, one big mistake sommeliers make is that they create a wine list that only appeals to them and their taste. And we see this all the time. You walk into a restaurant, it's filled with esoteric wines that nobody other than this one individual who made the wine list would know anything about it. It's very intimidating for consumers, for restaurant clients. So a good sommelier would be looking to fill the list with wines that match the clientele. In the case of the critic, we're looking for great wines that match, well, you know, the greater audience at large. But is there really that much of a difference? You know, if you work in a very niche restaurant that's focused on Basque cuisine, well, then, you know, you're working towards that. We obviously have a much wider remit, a much wider brief of what would qualify as good or not good, or good value or not value. But the essential nuts and bolts of the tasting are the same. If it says this on the label, then it should taste like a classic wine from that region in your mouth and in your glass.
Yeah,
but we could go on.
Yeah, David or Michael, do you have anything else to add to this? Otherwise, we are going to round up our evening.
Yeah, I'm not going to add to it because I've never served wine in a restaurant. I do not call myself a sommelier. I never have and never will. But I agree with John, actually, that, you know, the tasting is more or less the same. You're just maybe looking at a slightly different audience for the results of your reviews.
So thank you guys very, very much. Michael, I see you've done the De Niro, which means you definitely agree, which is this face.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Everything that was
amazing. And I wanted to thank our critics and thank all of our audience this evening for joining us for such a great night. Such awesome news that we had 400 people join us tonight. Critics, you did an absolutely amazing job, and it is difficult to put yourselves out there and to do this blind tasting, but cheers to you guys, and I hope you have a lovely and amazing night.
Good. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone. Hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks, crew.